thanks for coming on the show. Like I was saying, before we started, that I don't really have a lot of Army officers. Army in general, most of the podcast is Marines. I have reached out and told people that if they want to come on the show, I am not service. I don't discriminate to other services, so feel free to reach out and like you did to come on to the show. So right now you're serving, if I'm correct, in the Michigan National Guard, correct?
No, Colorado.
Okay.
Colorado National Guard.
Oh, you were in the Michigan National Guard from 03 to 05. My bad. Sorry. Got the notes mixed up there. Well, I want to talk about, you've obviously done a bunch of stuff. We were talking before that you were enlisted and all that stuff. You're a pilot now and you do that, that whole thing. I have a buddy that's in flight school right now in the Army that transitioned from the Marines. And I feel like that's kind of a big thing that a lot of people actually do that. So I don't know how much of that you can talk about, like how people do that. But I would like to get into the different paths for flight school, because you guys in the Army have your regular officers, that go and commission officers that go and become pilots, and then you have your warrant officer program, which is completely separate, and they kind of have a different mission. So I'd like to, get into all that, but before we do, let's start from the beginning. And why don't you go ahead and tell us, introduce yourself, tell us why you joined the military and why you joined the Army specifically.
Sure. So my name is Rob Bingham. I joined the Army in 2003. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school. I remember I was sitting on my couch one day thinking, what am I going to do? I was kind of born into a family that I didn't really have that many options as a kid. None of my family members really attended college. A lot of them were still trying to figure out what they were trying to do with their lives. So I had a brother-in-law at the time who was in the Army National Guard, and he's like, hey man, you should join the Army, at least the National Guard. He says, go get some experience, go learn a trade, come back, and then you can start your life up. He's like, I've been in for 6 years and I've never been deployed. So I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So just on a whim, I decided to go do it. Within about 8 months after getting home from training, I was deployed. So nice. It's pretty interesting how that worked out. I always want to say, like, I wish it was for some, patriotic reason why I joined and everything. But at the time, really, it was just, I didn't really know what to do with my life. And I just felt like there was a lot of opportunities for myself to kind of figure myself out, figure out who I wanted to be and how I could basically just contribute to the world.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be, a lot of people join for a lot of different reasons. There's the patriotic reasons. There's the benefits, like school benefits and stuff like that. And there's some people that just like that, like you're talking about, I don't really know what I'm going to do. Maybe college isn't the right thing right now. I mean, it might not be not the right thing, but just not right now. Someone like me, I got out of the Marines after 12 years and went to school. And although a lot of it felt very basic, I don't know, it just seems like I had a different mentality going into that than I probably would have when I was 18 years old, and the military gives you that exposure to all these different, world events and different things and people and stuff. It sets you up for something like school, I think, better. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that you're going to San Diego State right now, and you're going for journalism. Say 12 years ago, before, however many years ago, before you joined the Marines, did you know you had a passion for journalism?
I actually graduated this spring, a few months ago, but yeah. So in high school, I was on the school paper. I'm going through their school of journalism because I thought it was. Getting out of the Marine Corps, I was like, what am I going to fucking do? I'm a JTAC, I'm a forward observer. There's not a lot of those jobs out there in the real world. And then I had to kind of make a decision. Do I want to stay in the government sector or do I want to move into the real world, if you will, like get a regular job? And, on my way out, I was like, maybe I'll go and make documentaries. That's cool. Like somebody has to be the person out there traveling around making documentaries. Or maybe I'll work at a paper and be a photojournalist or something. I think that'd be cool. And then I settled on SDSU one because it's here in San Diego where I live. But I settled on their journalism program because within that program you can either do straight journalism, you can do advertising, and I think PR is another sector. So I went for the advertising route, and then all the non-advertising electives I had to take, I took all journalism classes so that I had experience in both. So I was like, I mean, I'm sure you know, a lot of people may not realize you don't need a degree in journalism to be a journalist. You just need to sit down and start writing to an audience that wants to hear your stuff. So I wanted to have a backup, and so I took advertising as well. But yeah.
Yeah, unless you need a license, you don't really need a degree to do a job. It's just kind of a check the box for the employer, unfortunately.
For sure.
But
for sure.
Yeah, congratulations, first of all, for graduating and
Thank you.
getting a degree. That's awesome. With me, man, like when I was younger, like I used to work for like CBS, and I used to work for Warner Brothers just as like a contractor, editing video and doing camera work.
Nice.
And I thought that's what I was going to do. Like I thought my life was in film, and it was kind of my passion as a kid. But after a 7-year gap between joining the Army and actually going to college, I realized that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I went for business, and now I'm actually enrolled in an MBA program.
Nice. There's a lot of good MBA programs for veterans and stuff. I know specifically a few guys that I served with went through USC's MBV program, which is a Master's of Business for Veterans, and they highly recommend that. So I think that's a really good thing. It's funny, like, so you had that gap and decided, hey, maybe that's not for me. I had that 12-year gap, probably 10 years before I picked up the camera again. And then I was like, dude, I really miss doing this. And it just kind of evolved into, all of this now. Like everybody has their different story though, so that's good stuff. Did you try to relate what that passion into the Army? Was that even a consideration, or were you like, hey, I want to do something way outside my wheelhouse?
No, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure you've heard many recruiter stories and how recruiters tell you one thing and what really happens. When I first enlisted, I told the recruiter, hey, I'm really into film. I'm really into cameras and editing. I would like to do something similar for the Army. And he, went through his little book of MOSs currently available. And he's like, oh, here's wire system electronic repair. Oh, that's the same thing. So they got me in the Army doing that. Then within like 8 months of being back from training, it's like, you're going with the infantry. So yeah, one thing you learn in the Army, it doesn't matter what your job is. If they need you to be in the infantry, you're in the infantry.
So you said after you got to your unit, how long was like boot camp for you? Where did you go to boot camp? And how long was your MOS school afterwards? Because the Marines, normally what the Marine Corps does, you have your 12 weeks of boot camp, 1 month of combat training, which is where you go and shoot machine guns and do all that stuff. And then you go to your MOS school, which are obviously varying length.
Yeah. So basic training, I want to say it was only like 8 weeks. It was 8 weeks of basic training. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Funny enough, I was 18 years old going off to basic training. It's the first time I was ever on an airplane. Yeah. Did that 8 weeks. Went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for my MOS school. Learned wire system repair there. So altogether, I was gone, like 6 months, 6 to 8 months. Returned back home. It wasn't too bad. It was a good opportunity to meet new people, get rid of my upper Michigan accent.
Yeah. That I've said it a lot on the podcast. Also, it's the military is such you get such an experience of diversity of like thought, regional diversity from around the country, racial, nationality. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in the Army, but there's foreigners that are serving in the U.S. military. So, like, I served with, like, a Jamaican guy, who, and you meet these people. I served with a guy from China, a kid that was from China. And one of my gunnies came from Iraq, actually. He was originally from Iraq. So it's hard to find another job in the world where you're going to get that kind of exposure to different thoughts and people.
Especially at such a young age. So it's funny. I don't really think about basic too much. I mean, it was 18 years ago, but I do recall it being such a cultural shock for me. I mean, I served with people from like Samoa. Like I don't even think at 18 years old I knew Samoa was existed. You know what I mean? So just that cultural diversity, like you said, it was pretty incredible. It was quite eye opening.
Yeah. So for your job, were you basically just repairing radios? Is that kind of the gist of it, or were you like a data guy?
No, it was repairing radios and actually getting in and soldering the systems and working on circuit boards. Like it was really fascinating stuff. I actually really did enjoy it. we would pull apart like computers, and we'd pull apart like field telephones and stuff, and actually figure out with like ometers, figure out like where the dead pieces are, and actually do replacements. So I could have, I mean, honestly, I could have taken that into a career field. Like that was a great technical experience and technical learning. I just decided not to.
Yeah, I know actually a few people that have done that, and they do pretty well for themselves now because that is a like highly sought after skill, and it's like you said, a technical skill, and you get it for free through the Army, man. Do you think you know what you learned in MOS school adequately prepared you for when you got to your unit, like what you were doing there, or was it kind of a check in the box? Let's hurry up and expose you to a little bit of everything, and then send you out there to get your real training?
Yes, the second one. It was funny because they actually didn't know. So my MOS was so specialized, they didn't know what to do with me when I got to my first unit. So they just had me like shadowing mechanics. So I was like around trucks and everything, and I'm like, this is nothing of what I was taught to do, but all right. I remember my commander at the time, he told me, he's like, what's your MOS? He's like, I don't know can you fix my phone? My phone's broke. I'm like, I don't know, give it to me, I'll find out. So I just remember sitting in a trailer fixing my commander's phone, and I fixed it.
Hey, you got to grow where you're planted, right? That's the saying there. So when you said after you got there, not too long, you guys started doing a workup for deployment?
Yeah, so I joined the Michigan National Guard, at 18 years old. Actually, when I got back from training, I moved to Wisconsin. I had family in Wisconsin. So I was a private E1. I was driving from Madison, Wisconsin to Manistee, Michigan for drill. And we're talking about 1 week in a month. I was paying it was my entire drill pay just to go to drill and back. So I was probably actually losing money on it. So I transferred to Wisconsin National Guard, and I happened to transfer just as they were gearing up for deployment. So the 32nd Infantry Brigade was gearing up for this massive deployment overseas. They're pulling extra soldiers because they needed to fill slots. I was lowest man on the totem pole with a good PT score, so I just got kind of voluntold to go deploy with the infantry.
Were you excited about it? Did you want to at all? I mean,
I was.
You didn't join for a combat MOS, so you know.
Yeah, I was excited about it. At the time, I wanted new experiences. I was still, very new being in the military, and I kind of wanted to understand my role, and I wanted to see like the bigger picture of serving in the military. And I thought a deployment, especially a combat deployment, might be a good way to do that. So I do remember some people that got pulled, they were worried about it, they had families. I was in a fortunate position where I was single. I didn't have a family I was leaving behind. I didn't have a career yet that I was leaving behind. I mean, I was 20 years old, so I was just a kid. So I was just in this position where I thought it'd just be a good opportunity to learn and develop myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's an experience, man. It's one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. Well, in the global war on terrorism, we thought it was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity for a lot of people, and it turned out to be a many time experience for some people.
I have sisters, man, that have been deployed like more than 6 times. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's some guys are, and there's guys that really feed off of it, that really enjoy it, because I mean, I'm sure you can talk about it also. When you're down range, there's so much less bullshit. It's all like, I come in and do my job. I come, if there's a gym or something like that, I go work out. Like I was a mechanic when I first came in. So when I first got to Iraq, I was at TQ, and there was a gym there. But when I was like in Sangin and stuff, we had like a little shitty prison gym, that we made. But it was like, you get in a rhythm of stuff, and you're not worried about like phone calls and texts from people and bills coming in, and so all that stuff is like, in the real world, you're focused on this.
It's true.
Yeah. So you didn't know any of this, obviously, going into it. What was your workup for your first deployment like? A lot of times when they pull people to do infantry jobs, in the Marine Corps, we call it provisional infantry. They end up being like convoy security. They do kind of like security role positions. Sometimes they do actual, hey, here's your area of operations, and you're going out and doing legitimate like foot patrols and constant actual, infantry stuff. Which one did yours kind of fall into?
So it was more of that. It was more like you guys are like the second tier. They kind of treated us like that, but it was all right. I still learned a lot. We did we did do convoys. We did some presence patrols. Most of it was security. So we did like, entry control points at some of the bases. I sat in a couple towers, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't super exciting. My first deployment, I wouldn't say it was the most exciting. We did get extended while we were over there. So, we spent 15 months in the desert. It was long and boring. Yeah. That was my first deployment, first experience. Learned a lot, but at the same time, like, I was ready to get home.
Oh, I bet, dude. After 15 months, I can't imagine. That's a
That's
lot.
That's the whole workup and everything. The whole workup to the whole work down, 15 months.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, I mean, you know what's funny? Well, not really funny, but it's kind of seemed to be more the rule than the exception that Army units were getting extended. It seemed like every unit was going 12 to 15 months. Yep. And, that's tough, man. Marines go 7 months unless you're with like a higher command, like what would be a brigade level command in your case or higher. Then it's a year. Anything below that, like battalion level or something, you're there usually for 7 months and then out. And a lot of us, that's plenty of time to be away from home. So I can't imagine what's it like when you get that notification that, hey, we're getting extended. Like,
well, I kind of was in the swing of things at the time. We just were told, we were told well in advance that, hey, we might be over here a little bit longer. It all depends on when the next unit's ramping up. So we kind of knew, and they're like, yep, we'll be here 3 more months. So at the time, all Army units were overseas at least 12 months.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just an additional 3. It wasn't that bad.
Was this during the stop loss time also? Were there people still being stop lossed at that time?
I don't recall. I know at the time they were doing bar to reenlistment. If you do not reenlist ahead of time or something like that, I don't remember what it was exactly, but yeah, they had some weird rules going on at the time.
Yeah. So for those that don't know what I'm talking about, the stop loss at the beginning of the war in Iraq, global war on terrorism, all that, a lot of people were coming up on their EAS time frame, and the military instituted what they call a stop loss, meaning that you can't get out of the military. They won't let you out. Your contract is extended until, I don't know if they had an actual date on it or if it was one of those, hey, it's extended until we don't need you anymore kind of deals. But I knew a few people that got hit with that. And then I knew a few guys that got tricked with that who were getting ready to get out, and they would, mess around with them and tell them they got a stop loss form. Here you go, man. You're not getting out now.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a good time. So what was in Iraq? What was your kind of like exposure to enemy? Were you guys getting into anything out there? Was it mostly, for most people, combat is 99% boredom with that, 1% of like craziness.
Sure. So the first deployment was Kuwait. So, I mean, there really was not combat. Like we would go up to Iraq when we were doing convoys, but we spent most of the time in Kuwait.
Oh, gotcha.
So, and that was the security. So we did a lot of security in Kuwait. The second deployment was the Iraq deployment. We were actually, I was at Camp Bucca, Iraq, and we were actually hands-on with terrorists, with convicted prisoners. So that was an interesting deployment for sure. The second one was a lot more interesting.
Oh, I bet, man. Kuwait's great. Kuwait, I remember going to Kuwait. We got off ship. We were on the Mew, so floating around on ship for 7 months, which is as miserable as it sounds, maybe more miserable than you can imagine. But enough so where I got to Camp Buring, there was 3 of us, and I remember we go to the chow hall there, and we sit down to eat, and there was these soldiers sitting next to us, and they're like, this is like the worst food we've ever had. This is like the worst chow hall in Kuwait. And we're over here just like, oh my God, this is the best food ever. Like mowing it down. Like, I can't believe we get so much food. This is crazy. Because
what always surprised me is, okay, they can have real milk in Kuwait, but they can't have real milk in Iraq. Like that, I was like, where's the milk? Like that's the one thing I missed the most in Iraq.
You never got the hot, radiated milk that can sit out in the sun all day and still be okay?
The box milk? Yeah, we got that. That's not milk. That's not milk.
That's not the real milk there. Yeah. Well, I guess if you're worrying about milk, your problems aren't too bad, When you when you guys went to your second deployment, you mentioned that you were guards for prisoners.
Yeah. Yep.
That was, not too long after Abu Ghraib, right? Only a few years after. So could you still feel the effects from that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of regulations and policies brought down on us. There was a lot of supervision. Like we had to go through a lot of training about how not to treat the prisoners. It was very interesting. I mean, I think someone while I was over there got in trouble for like riding on a prisoner's back or something like that. Like the military was just very sensitive to any mistreatment of prisoners at the time, rightfully so. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's got to be. I've always thought that would be just like a weird job, even not even overseas, but even here in the States, being like a jailer.
I don't know how people do it. Like here in the United States, like I had that exposure to it for about 9 months. I gotta tell you, that's the worst job you can ever imagine.
Well, I'm sure being a guard over there in Iraq is way worse than here in the States. You know, I'm sure like the living conditions and the rules and everything else, like, and the prisoners, you're guarding people that are coming off the battlefield, you know, some of which may be innocent, may not be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's such a crazy thing. Did you guys ever have any issues with like them trying to riot or push back or like, you know, any issues with the prisoners, or were they kind of docile after you got them?
No, I mean, there's a lot of times where there was like fights and stuff like that between the prisoners themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any riots. It was at a weird time too, when we were transitioning like a lot of stuff back to the Iraqi people, because this was when was my second deployment, like 2009.
Yeah.
So we were transitioning a lot to Iraq. So we had to go through these classes where we're told like if prisoners escape, like we can't physically do anything to them. We can follow them and ask them to come back, but we can't actually have hands on to them. Like there's all these weird regulations and rules of engagement that are going on at that time.
That's crazy. That's
so
like
weird.
That's like what you tell the CVS security guard. Like, look,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
tell them not to steal stuff. But if they do it, what are you gonna do? You know?
Yeah. That's
So
basically what it was. The prisoners didn't know that at the time, obviously, but
yeah.
that's what we were being told.
Were you guys in the process of like transferring prisoners over to Iraqi care, or were you guys releasing them? Like, how did that go?
We were, yeah. So Camp Bucca shut down 2010. So we're like the last unit that was actually active there while it was a prison. So yeah, so we were passing out. I think it was 183. They call them 180s, 360s. So one day, 180 prisoners would come through. We'd be the ones patting them down, giving them new clothes, all that kind of stuff, making them sit down, waiting for buses or waiting for transportation. They'd either be loaded up into a Chinook or loaded up into a bus and taken off of Camp Bucca. So literally, like, we're in charge of getting thousands of prisoners out of Camp Bucca.
Man,
it was rough.
Yeah, especially, you know, how old were you at the time?
At this time, I was, second deployment, 23.
23. Imagine what the average American kid is doing at 23 years old, you know, compared to what you're over there, like transferring prisoners and stuff. When you guys got there, was the facility like a long-term facility, or was it one like, hey, this is like a holding facility while we make sure these guys are good guys or bad guys? You know, we separate.
No, it was long-term. It was long-term at the time. They had a school there where they actually taught like education to the terrorists. The whole idea, this is still when we were in COIN, right? So it's counterinsurgency, winning hearts and minds. The idea was to reform the prisoners while they're in the prison, make sure that they had a trade, so that way when they get out, they have sustainable business. So they don't have to go back to the terrorists in order to find income for the families. So they had a school there for education. They had a brick factory where they taught the prisoners how to make bricks. So there was a lot of good stuff that was going on at that prison.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do something for them. That's like anything. If you just leave them sitting, they're just going to get into trouble and stuff like that.
And then you have a picture of me like sitting against this building with like this nice painting, a mural on it. That was at Camp Bucca. So all those paintings were actually the prisoners. So there's one prisoner, they called him Picasso. I don't remember what his real name was, but he would actually go through and he would paint these amazing, incredible murals on all of the prison buildings.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. Did you guys have Iraqi counterparts there, like Iraqi prison guards also?
So there were some prison guards. We didn't really work with them too much. We had interpreters and that kind of stuff with us.
If you know anything about how their regulations were, how were they treated by Iraqi prison guards compared to like American prison guards? If you can speak to that.
How did the prisoners treat the Iraqi prison guards?
How did the Iraqi prison guards treat the prisoners compared to like how, like, you're talking about the Americans are giving them like classes, like, here, paint murals, here's a, you know.
It was a different story when their own guys were there. That's for sure. And same with other countries. Other countries don't have the same rules and regulations and I guess ethics that the United States military tries to uphold.
Isn't that crazy, man? Like when you're there 23 years old and you're seeing people treat other human beings in a completely different manner than you've always learned, always been told, and being in the military and what you're doing, like I'm sure some of the stuff that went on, you could probably get imprisoned for if you were
Sure.
doing some of the stuff that like Iraqis would do to each other.
Sure. And that's where learning comes in and self-development and growth. Like there's power struggles that go on. I mean, you have power, but it's like really learning how to harness your power and actually use it for good when you could easily use it for bad. So I mean, there's definitely a lot of personal growth that comes with it.
Were there any like low security prisoners that you could interact with? Like I don't know what that kind of relationship is in a prison.
Yeah, we didn't interact with any of them. Not really. I mean, we the only times we really talk to them is when we tell them not to do something, or if they're coming through security checkpoints and we have to tell them what to do. But no, we were very, very biased and just not forming any relationships with them.
So after that deployment, how did you feel about what was going on in the war? It was like ending around that time, like you said, we were starting to pull out. I was also there in 09. I was in TQ, and I remember we were prepping everything to start pulling everything out. And we actually had, and maybe the Army may have done something like this, but in the Marines, you could do your 7-month deployment, and for a little while there, you could request to roll over and just stay in Iraq, and with the next unit that comes in, they give you like 2 weeks to go anywhere. They'll pay for you to go anywhere in the world, a flight, and then that's your 2 weeks of R&R, and then you just do a whole nother deployment with a new unit. And the guys that rolled over from my unit that rolled over to stay on for another one didn't even stay in Iraq. They ended up going to Afghanistan. They were there for like another month, and then they shipped them straight to Afghanistan. So this was like the kind of the down, of major forces there. What was your thoughts coming off that deployment and kind of how things were going?
I knew I didn't want to do it again. I mean, at that point, I was just over it. Having 2 deployments like that, where I just kind of felt like a cog in the wheel, not really feeling like I kind of felt like if I wasn't there, someone else could fill that spot easily. Yeah, I didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
That's a good way to put it, man, because when I was a mechanic in Iraq, it was kind of hard to like stay motivated, to like want to sit there and turn wrenches, because you're like on a base protected, and my job is to wake up, go fix trucks, then go eat lunch, and then fix more trucks, then go back to my can, or my chew, and do it all over again the next day. And when you know that there's other people out there like fighting and like doing like actual like crazy stuff, it's hard to think of yourself as being important when you're a support guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know exactly what you're saying. That kind of drove me too, where I was like, man, I'm done. Like I'm done being a mechanic. I want to go do something else. And when I was in Iraq in 2009, I submitted my lat move package to become a fire support man, a forward observer, and then eventually a JTAC down the road. At what point did you decide, like, did you get out after this, or did you get out and come back, or did you go ahead and switch over?
Well, after Iraq, I mean, the number one thing I wanted to do is just get out of the Midwest. That was my big thing. So I moved to Colorado like immediately after I got back from that deployment. So I've lived in Colorado now for about 11 years. But I joined a unit here. I ended up in an aviation unit. It was just by happen chance. It was the only place that had a slot available. In the aviation unit, I enjoyed it. It was way different coming from a prison, in Iraq, in an infantry unit, to this aviation unit in Colorado. It really helped me kind of just remember what the things I enjoyed about the Army. The leadership aspect, the people aspect, and get away from just the dead-on mission focus. And I had a really good mentor. He was my company commander at the time. And I told him, like, the reason I joined the Army, like, I always wanted to be an officer. I said I wanted to lead soldiers. I wanted to be a company commander on a deployment. Like, I told him that from the beginning. I was an E5. And I said, however, I'm thinking about getting out. And he kind of talked to me and told me about what it's like in aviation, what it's like as an officer. And I was like, well, I'm going to join ROTC and see what I think about it. So at 7 years in the Army, I went to ROTC, did that for about 2 years, and thought, okay, I can see myself doing this. The commander at the time, he offered me a flight packet, and I said, nah, I don't know. I don't know if, I want to fly helicopters. That's never been anything that I've really thought about doing before.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, what do you want to do? And I was like, I'd like to be a commander of an infantry unit. I said, I've been in the infantry. I know the infantry. I'd like to lead an infantry unit. So he sent me to an infantry unit to go split train and learn from them. So I spent about 4 months with the infantry as a cadet. And I was like, you know what? It was pretty sweet back there in aviation.
Yeah,
I think I might want to go back. So I went back and decided I would put in my packet and commission as an aviation officer.
That is for sure two different worlds, the infantry and the aviation world.
Yeah.
Yeah, one is definitely a cush job. Yeah, like being a helicopter pilot, and how many people actually ever consider that? Most people in the real world, it's to me, it's kind of mind blowing. They see helicopters and they're like, I would never get in a helicopter. Like, it seems like, how does that thing work? And then, because you're a pilot, I've ridden in the back of one many times. It just becomes like another thing where you're like, all right, man, I'm just flying here. Like, that's a sick job to get into. Was the package and like signing up for it, how hard is it to get into Army aviation? Is it a difficult process?
So it normally is, yeah. So, I mean, as you know, like 1% of the population joins the military. Only 1% of that population actually gets picked up as aviation. So, I mean, it's very, very selective. However, I served in this unit and everyone knew me prior to me putting in the packet. So I kind of had a home field advantage, but I still had to meet all the criteria. So I had to go, and this was actually true. So I had to go to the flight board and I had to, do all the flight tests. I had to get EKGs, my eyes checked out. The flight doc at Fort Carson, he went to my records and he's like, you can't have allergies and be a pilot. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you have allergies. You can't be a pilot. I'm like, I don't have allergies. And he's like, well, it says here in your records that in 2003, you got Mucinex. Like, that was basic training, man. That was like 8 years ago. Come on. So yeah, so they will try disqualifying you for anything as you're boarding. So
yeah, I mean, that makes sense though. For the Marine Corps and the Navy, they all pilots kind of start out in the same school in Florida. And then from there, they just learn how to fly your basic planes and stuff like that. And then from there, they split off to their different platforms, jets, helos, or like C-130s and stuff like that. What's the process in the Army? Because you're not splitting from fixed wing to rotary wing. There's just different rotary wing platforms. What's the process for you guys?
So I think that's interesting that they do that. And I wonder if there's an advantage to doing fixed wing before rotary. But yeah, the Army's just straight rotary. So Fort Rucker, Alabama, flight school is probably about, on average, it's about 1.5 years. You go get a live in lovely lower Alabama. You start in your training helicopter. So they used to do TH-67s, which is training helicopter 67. It's kind of like a news helicopter. And the thing is, like, it's a beast. There's hydraulics, but they're not as good as like a go-to-war aircraft. You definitely have to just manually fly this thing, and that's how you learn. Then after you go through the training, you go to they call it the go-to-war, or your advanced airframe, which is either a Blackhawk, a Chinook, an Apache, and then you learn how to fly that. So it's a pretty cool process because they go step by step. So you start off like in academics, where you learn all about the systems. And then you go into, it was actually funny, my first day on the flight line, they were talking about a helicopter flight. I thought I was going to jump in this helicopter and the guy was going to tour me around and talk to me. No, we get up in the air and he's like, you have the controls. And I'm like, what? So yeah, you're literally flying a helicopter day one you get on the flight line. So it was a very interesting experience. My experience is a little different because the Army did this big transition from the TH-67 as the training helicopter to the UH-72, which is like an advanced airframe. So I had to learn an advanced airframe right off the bat. So I'm in the Lakota, which is the 72, trying out, digital cockpit and all that kind of stuff while just learning to fly and trying to get air sense. So it was a pretty interesting experience.
It has to be, right? I mean, that's one of those things. It's like that. It seems so interesting. I kind of wish I would have done something like that. Like it's one of those things I still might pursue, maybe flying in the civilian world on my own, because it's more accessible than people believe. I didn't realize how accessible it was till I was around pilots, because, like I was saying before, the Marine pilots start out flying like regular planes, and I think they leave training with a private pilot's license for like a single engine aircraft or something like that. And after that, then like they start working through the different airframes and stuff, but it's always pretty competitive for the guys that are wanting to get specific airframes. Is it like that for you guys? Are you trying to pick something up front, or is it obviously it's the needs of the Army that comes into play at some point? So if there's just no spots, there's no spots. You're going to go fly whatever we tell you. But how does that work for you guys?
So it's highly competitive, as everything kind of in the military is. It's all based on like academics and your scores on all your check flights. So your check flight, they test you on everything. They put you through all the emergency procedures, and you get graded on everything. So one thing that I always try to do, I try never to be the smartest guy in the room. If I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong crowd. So great thing about flight school is I was not the smartest guy in the room. There was so many intelligent people who branch aviation. However, I had like a 97% overall in the entire year and a half. I had 97%, came out with their entire class scores. I was like dead in the middle at a 97%. Like that's how competitive it was. So what they did, the needs of the Army is they said, this is how many airframe we have available. This is how many Blackhawks, this is how many Chinooks, this is how many Apaches, this is how, in different models. So there's an Alpha Lima Mike for the Blackhawk. I don't want to bore everybody with the different models, but and then they had a C-26, I think it's C-26, a fixed wing airplane, and there was only a couple slots for that, and that's like the golden slot right there. If you're
really?
In the Army it is, yeah, because it's VIP. You know what I mean? You're not going into hot LZs. You're toting around generals, and it's a pretty cushy job. What's that?
Who wants to fly to Europe and do stuff like that when you can go chill in Afghanistan, man?
Yeah. But yeah, so then they say how many slots, and then they go from the top of the list, and you get to choose your airframe. The fortunate part being in the Guard is I'm already in a unit who only has certain aircraft and already has me in a slot. So all the Guard guys were guaranteed the airframe that our unit gave us. So my unit allowed me the option to choose if I wanted Blackhawks or Chinooks, and I chose Blackhawks.
Why'd you go with Blackhawks over Chinooks?
So it's always choose the mission, don't choose the aircraft. I just like the mission of Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks are the guys. I mean, they're the air assault. They're the ones taking people out of the battlefield. The Chinook is more like cargo hauling and stuff like that. I mean, it's an amazing mission what they do, and it's very, very important. I just wanted to be the one that could potentially save lives. Like that's something that, to me, I felt like that would be the right mission.
Yeah. So behind the VIP planes, which airframe fills up the next fastest?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I mean, it all depends on the class. Like sometimes the Chinooks go really fast. Sometimes the Apaches go really fast.
See, I would assume that it's always the Apaches, that people would be fighting to get into the Apache seats.
You think that's funny, but like literally, like Apache pilots, 80%, I just threw that statistic out there. A high percent of their flight time is literally just hovering. Because that's what Apaches do. Yeah, they just hover in their little radar, tracks enemy, and
That's one of the things I don't like about Apache pilots and how they employ work. So as a JTAC, working with Apache pilots was fucking difficult for me, because they just, like you said, they hover. They're a maneuver element. They want to hover, kind of scan the battlefield and engage from as far out as possible. Whereas I'm used to working with Marine pilots, Cobra pilots, and Huey pilots who are like, bumblebees that are flying in, trying to hit the guy, get as close as possible, and then pull off. And it's just two different kind of tactics. And I think and you can speak to this as a 60s guys, you know, on the Army aviation side, the Apache guys weren't all fully read into what our tactics were either, like our holding areas and stuff like that. Like if I gave an Apache pilot a holding area, he's like, okay, sure, bro. Like he wasn't going to hold there. And I had to understand and keep an ay on him because, you know, we'd be shooting IDF also at the same time and they'd just be wanting to fly all over the place. So for me, the Apaches are sweet, but it was difficult to work with some of the Army Apache pilots. And the first guy I met out there in Kuwait where we were doing a lot of work with them was actually a Marine mechanic who went over as a warrant officer into their warrant officer program and became a pilot. And I was like connected really well with them. Like, oh, we were both mechanics. That's cool. In the Marines. That's awesome, man. And then we were completely on different sides of the sphere with TTP. So we kind of butted heads on stuff like that. But you know, it's just different. Backing up though real quick. When you were in school, were you going through school with the warrant officers or is that a separate flight school that they go through?
So there's different sections that you do in flight school.
Okay.
You start off with your OBC or your BOLIC, so Basic Officer Leadership Course. The officers do their BOLIC, Basic Officer Leadership Course. The warrant officers do their WOBIC, which is the Warrant Officer Basic Course. So that's separate. And then after that's completed, then the next step is, I think the next step was Dunker. So you actually go through the Dunker course, which is you're literally in a pool area. The warrant officers are integrated in this. So you're in a pool area. There's like a cockpit of a helicopter. They take it, they put it up above the pool, they dip it in the pool, flip it over, and you have to like unbuckle yourself and get out. So it's like an entire day of all these different things of trying to survive when you're submerged underwater inside of a cockpit. So warrant officers are involved in that. Then you go to SEER school, and that's the first time that you really get to know the warrant officers because the commissioned officers are then team leaders who have to lead the warrant officers through SEER. So SEER was the best school I've ever done in my entire life. Like I felt so fortunate to be able to, I mean, yeah, there's parts that sucked. Like, you know what SEER school is, I'm sure. But I felt so fortunate to be able to attend that SEER school.
It's
then
funny.
after that, go ahead.
Everybody I talk to that has gone to SEER says the same thing. It's like, dude, it was like the most miserable I've ever been, like the most emaciated, you know, like starving and just, it's like your mind is fucked for a little bit. But they're like, it's probably the most I've learned in any school in the military.
Yeah, it's probably the most I've learned in any school in general. And that's including like college and stuff. Like you really just, you learn about yourself, you learn about human dynamics, you learn, there's a lot of psychology in it too. Sure. And if you actually take time to, like, when you're all said and done and everything's over, if you take time to look back at it, you realize the psychology behind a lot of the situations you were put in. So it's very, very interesting. And it's interesting too, because there's psychologists that work there. Like it's an elaborately created scenario to you know, put you in a position where you are not used to.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's actually pretty incredible.
It's a 3-week course, right, for you guys?
Yeah.
Yep. Man, good stuff. So following that, what were you saying? Sorry for interrupting.
So following that, then you go to your basically your basic flight school. Where you just kind of learn how to fly and how to get air sense. Then you go to instruments. Then you go to basic warriors, where you're learning how to like fly with maps. And then you go to your advanced airframe. And we're together with the warrant officers for the entire time for that.
Now, can you kind of explain like why you have warrant officers and why you have commissioned officers and kind of their separate roles in the Army aviation community?
Yeah, a lot of people find it confusing. It's confusing in some senses, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So let's say like myself, you know, I'm a commissioned officer. I'm in charge of admin for all the soldiers. When I was a company commander, I had 77 people underneath me, and I was in charge of leading that 77, coming up with a vision for the company and pushing us towards that vision. But I also had to fly. But what I like to say is like my brain is like this iceberg, right? And there's these penguins on my iceberg. And there's only so many penguins that can fit on that iceberg. And if you start putting more penguins on that, some are going to start falling off. And that's kind of what it's like. But the warrant officers, the only penguins they have is their aircraft. So they are the subject matter experts of that aircraft. and that's it. With me, I actually listen to my subject matter experts. So they're the ones who keep me safe when I fly. Yes, I know how to fly an aircraft. I know everything, but they're watching me just in case I'm distracted with everything else that I'm dealing with. So that's kind of the difference between the warrant officer and the commission.
How in a unit, and how, well, I guess, can you kind of explain the breakdown of an aviation unit, and then like how many commissioned officers are there compared to warrant officers, and then I guess you can go do your enlisted personnel that keep the aircraft running and stuff like that.
Sure. So I was in charge of the headquarters unit. So in headquarters, I was the only captain as the commander. There's lieutenants that worked in the operations, that worked in the S3 shop. Actually, headquarters probably isn't the right one. I'll do mine now because it's a line unit. So I'm in a line unit. It's a major command. So my commander is major. I'm the XO, the executive officer. I have a warrant officer who's in charge of the safety program. I have a warrant officer who's in charge of the maintenance program. I have a warrant officer that's in charge of the aviation mission survivability, and then one that like verifies all of our aviation warrant equipment is correct. So those are our top warrant officers. Below them, we have lower ranking warrant officers too, and they're like instructor pilots. They're and some are just kind of coming up. They're not like they don't have like a designation yet, but they're kind of just learning everything they can, so that way when they're ready, they can get a designation. So there's a lot more warrant officers than there are commissioned officers. I would say probably about 4 warrants to every 1 officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
we still have enlisted too, and our enlisted guys are all of our crew chiefs and stuff.
Yeah.
And maintainers.
Yeah. And you guys obviously in Blackhawks and stuff have a very good relationship with your crew chiefs. It's obviously important and stuff. The Marine Corps, I'm sure it's the same way. You don't have like specific crew chiefs for specific pilots. It's all like a rotation, just constant, Yeah. So I guess my next question is, when someone's coming in, what can they expect? Like if I'm a new pilot, I just finished MOS school and I'm getting to my unit, am I coming in fully trained and now again, is it like before? Is it like before, like you get a little bit of everything and then we're going to teach you specifics?
Yeah, you have the license to learn, basically, is what they say. Like, I came out with my FAA certified commercial helicopter pilot's license. So FAA certified everything, but I didn't know everything. I just knew the basic things to not kill myself. And that was basically it. So the warrant officers, they're the ones, so especially your IPs, your instructor pilots, they're the ones who get you from where you are to where you need to be. So we have what they call FAC levels. But let's talk about oral level. So it's your readiness level. So you start off right when you come back from flight school, you start off as oral 3. So this is where you need to do basic tasks. So you'll have to do basic tasks. You have to prove that you can do all your emergency procedures. You can do them all, without scaring your IP. When we're talking about emergency procedures, like a lot of people don't really understand what that means. Let's just talk about like an auto rotation. Like think if your engines go out in a helicopter, what do? You can't eject yourself. It's not like a jet. If you eject yourself in a helicopter, you're going right through the rotor blades, right?
For sure.
So we're talking about 1,000 feet dropping at 1,200 foot per minute and having to use aerodynamics to stop yourself and land on the ground. So it's pretty serious stuff. And the IPs make sure that you can execute all of those emergency procedures before they'll let you go to RL2. And then RL2 is doing all your mission tasks. So then you have to show that you can actually execute a mission, plan appropriately for it. And then you go to your RL1. And RL1 means that you're up, you're good on everything, and you can go and actually do real world missions.
Now, something that a lot of people outside of the military or outside of the aviation community may not realize is that all the things that you see, helicopter pilots do, not every pilot can do that. They have to have been trained on that. They have to be current on that. They have to have done that in training or something within a certain amount of time frame, correct?
Yeah. So, and this is the thing too, in the military, like a lot of people think you are, as an officer, you still have to do your job as an officer. You also have to do there's so much more time committed to it. And there's a lot of study because we get tested on things all the time. Like The Army's, I like to say the Army is really good at making anything that sounds fun not fun, and aviation is no different. So it's literally rote memorization, memorizing the most minute, detailed things about the helicopter. Yeah, it's interesting.
And just chasing qualifications. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. And I mean, there was a raid. We were going to do a raid in Iraq. We were planning, or no, in Afghanistan. We were planning a raid in Afghanistan, and we had to scale back, I think, our helo force because some of the pilots weren't qualified for night landings. And I'm like, what? Like in Afghanistan? Like how is that like a thing? I know, right? But and that was like the first time that a lot of people, including myself, because I wasn't a JTAC or anything then, I was just a fires chief. I was like, how is that a thing? How are they here without having this, like, you know, what I would think a very basic thing. It might have been a little bit more into it than that, but that was like what we were
probably
doing
was
on the planning side.
So yeah, so I mean, so from an aviation standpoint, I mean, there's no real such thing as night landings. Like we can land the same day or night. What does come into consideration is crew rest. So if they're beyond their duty day of what they're allowed to fly, and it's going into the night, they can't fly. Like crew rest is a very, very strict thing. It's right in the regulations, because you can, if you're sleep deprived, you'll start making bad decisions, and bad decisions can add up, especially when you have people in the back. So a lot of people think that we're, you know, these divas who just don't like to stay up late at night, but we can, but we just need to know that well in advance so we can sleep to be within our crew rest cycle.
The aviation community is the only community that has like realized that sleep is kind of important. You know, every other community prides themselves on, oh, you know, we stayed up for this many hours or we did this. And it's like, dude, sleep is important. You're making these bad decisions. You start, you know, hallucinating and stuff after, if it's a certain amount of time, like it's just not healthy for you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, in the infantry, I mean, I prided myself in the fact that I could be okay on 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And what I realized is I'm not. Like, I just thought I was. Like, realizing now that I get a decent amount of sleep, just how much better I can perform and how much more I can do.
Do you want to talk through some of the different, I mean, you mentioned previously that there was a bunch of different Blackhawk platforms. Can you kind of talk through, you know, some of those key platforms, some of the roles that platform covers?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Alpha Lima is like the original, right? So the Alpha model was the first model, and it went to a Lima. So it's just minuscule like upgrades that have happened to it. So they just call it an Alpha Lima. You know, it's for air assaults, insertions. If you put a red cross on it and get it blessed off, you know, it can be for medevac, it can be for search and rescue. In our Blackhawks, so we do search and rescue here. So we work with local search and rescue organizations within Colorado. We also work with wildland firefighters. So we actually fight fires as well. That's awesome. I should have sent you some of those videos and pictures, man. Like it was a couple of years ago, I got deployed out there for 4 days fighting fires, and insane experience. So that's the Alpha Lima. There's a newer model called the Mike. So the Alpha Lima, I mean, that was made in the 60s. So the helicopters I fly are literally older than I am.
That's nice.
It's basically a locomotive. It's a train. Everything is steam gauge. You're manually flying that thing. And the Mike, they transitioned it to where it's more autopilot. So you have this little like lever thing that you can kick on some autopilot gears, and it'll hover for you. Like it'll do all these amazing things for you. And that's the Mike. And most active duty units are transitioned to the Mike, but they're super expensive and on a state budget for the Guard. I don't see it likely in the foreseeable future for us to transition to the Mike.
Is it one of those ones where the guys like you that are still in the older model, like we're like, yeah, we like it like this. This is you're actually flying the aircraft. It's more mechanical.
Yeah, that happens. Oh yeah. The guys who are pro Alpha Lima are pro Alpha Lima for sure.
You guys are lazy with your technology over there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I get it. There's an art to being an aviator, and there's an art to doing things manually and doing them yourself. However, the fog of war happens, and you know that. I mean, when you're in a situation, there's a million things going on. It's possible to make a mistake, and there's great aviators out there who have made mistakes.
For sure.
Just in my graduating class, I mean, I graduated flight school November of 2016. I've had 6 people that I've graduated with die already in helicopter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very common thing. People make mistakes.
In training accidents or like in combat situations, or a
Both.
mixture? Both.
Yeah, both. Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are. Bad things happen, and just having that extra level of control to help you out could save your life.
Yeah, that's the seriousness of flying, man. Like, again, people that may not be in that community may not realize, like, there's a set of rules, and the rules are written in blood. There's a reason the checklist are the way they are and the order that they are, and there's a way that, we do things like this because of this. There's a reason for the sleep and all that. And you're right. There's pilots make mistakes. Mistakes happen with the aircraft, like some mechanical issues that you can't deal with, or I don't know. Lately, there's been a push about people talking about aircraft readiness in the military and how more should be allocated to it and stuff like that. And, there's a lot of accidents. There was one, I think, not too long ago, an F-18 or an F-16, I can't remember, went down not too long ago.
In Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah, so what's your take on that? Do you think it needs more funding, or do you think it's something, I mean, what can we do to stop some of these accidents, or do you think in this field it's inevitable?
I mean, accidents happen. Unfortunately, to say that, like, it is inevitable that an accident can happen. However, the maintenance posture for a lot of these aircrafts, I just told you, like, they're from the 60s. Like, to maintain those, we have some amazing maintainers in the Army aviation. However, just maintenance, it gets so backed up and so backlogged. There's just so much to do and so much to fix on these aircraft. And there's never enough people, there's never enough time, and there's never enough money. And that's the problem that we face in the military in general. There's never enough people, and never enough time, and never enough money. So what's unfortunate about it, though, is a lot of accidents have been happening, actually. And I've only been tracking them for the last 6 years because I've only been in aviation for the last 6 years. But it's really blown me away just how many accidents could have been prevented if it was for better maintenance of the aircraft.
Yeah, man. It's hard to like imagine that being an issue, not having the funds for that when you look at the military budget and all the stuff that goes into it. I don't know. It's just it's an unfortunate thing. Hopefully that works out for you guys. When you're getting ready to go on a deployment, I'm assuming you're like most units where you get a plus up in like funds and stuff like that and get everything ready to go. Do you guys generally deploy with your own helos, or were you falling in on other helos?
You fall in on others.
Okay. Did you do a deployment with your? Have you?
I did. So actually, I just returned November of 2020. So I deployed over to Kosovo. So it was a humanitarian peacekeeping mission. But yeah, I was the HHC commander for that deployment with 77 people. Just in my company, there's more people in the task force that we deployed with. But yeah, we fell into, I want to say 6 Blackhawks. Yeah. Maybe eight. Yeah, 8 Blackhawks. Ours that we left in Colorado were definitely in better shape, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're not getting probably beaten up every day. You guys are actually flying actual missions out there. What are we doing in Kosovo? I didn't even realize there's anything going on over there.
So it's peacekeeping. So, there's border disputes for Kosovo. Kosovo is kind of like Israel, where there's some countries over there in the Baltics that just don't view it as an actual country. It's it's very similar to the whole Palestine-Israel debate. But back when Bill Clinton was president, like, he's the one who basically gave independence and declared Kosovo as a country. And we've been there protecting them ever since.
Really? And I mean, how much of a threat is there for you guys? Is there like a real threat there? Is there anything actually going on there? Is it more of just a presence, kind of just having the presence there is enough?
So yeah, it mostly is presence. So initially, Russia was embedded deeply into Kosovo. So during the whole invasion and everything, they pushed Russia out. So there's always still the threat that Russia could invade Kosovo again. The surrounding countries, there's always a threat that they could, like Serbia and Kosovo do not get along. So there's always the potential threat. Who knows? We're there just to make sure that there's freedom of movement basically within Kosovo.
As a pilot, what's your favorite kind of mission to get into?
Can you hear my dogs in the background?
Yeah, it's going crazy. It's all right. We can wait a minute if you want. No, it's all good. But yeah, what kind of what's your favorite kind of mission to do? Like, is it a search and rescue? Is it kind of that, run in, drop some dudes off, and fly away real quick?
Yeah. So my passion is deeply rooted in community service, and that's the reason why I continue to still serve in the military. Like I said, my unit does a lot of like search and rescues and fires. So anything where I'm providing, a larger service than myself, that selfless service is what keeps me going. So yeah, if I was, we did a lot of humanitarian missions where we brought like food and water to the local populace in Kosovo during the pandemic. That was huge. My unit actually brought a Connex strapped to a Blackhawk, which that I know of, it's never been done before, in order to create a hospital for COVID vaccine testing in Kosovo. Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. When I got deployed for 4 days to go fight fires right in my backyard here in Colorado, that was absolutely incredible. And then we do search and rescue all the time where we help out like injured hikers that are stuck up on mountains. So anything like that is the stuff that kind of keeps me, that feeds my passion and keeps me going.
Yeah, for sure. I bet that's a pretty common thing out there in Colorado, is having to rescue people, because there's some real wilderness out for people that have never been to Colorado. There's some real wilderness out there. You can get yourself into trouble real quick if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens quite often.
When you guys are fighting fires, so we obviously, I'm in San Diego, Southern California is always on fire. Yeah. I saw something the other day I didn't even realize they have these up in the mountains. They have these. It's kind of like basically like a big ass pool, and then like if there's a fire, they flip on a switch and it fills the pool up so that the helicopters can come and get water there. It's like a pre-staged water site. Is that something like you guys use?
So we wouldn't have that. If anyone had that, it'd be the wildland force or the firefighters to put up for us. But I haven't seen it. I haven't seen one of those. What we do is it's Colorado. It's up in the mountains. There's pools everywhere.
Okay.
So, like the mountain, the snow will melt and there'll be like little pools. But yeah, we'll just dip out of pools. Actually, we were up in Walsenburg. I don't remember the name of the town, but we couldn't find water anywhere, but a guy had a really nice swimming pool in his backyard. So we decided to use that.
You just dipping into that?
Dipped into a swimming pool, yep.
I'm sure there's some kind of rules that allow that to happen. Is there any kind of pushback from the pool owner? Like, hey, man.
He had fire on 3 sides of his house. So we essentially saved his house with his own pool. So I'm sure he was pretty happy.
How much training do you have to get? Is there specific training that you do before you go out and start using these water buckets and releasing them and stuff like that?
We do. So we do a fire conference every year where we actually get with wildland forest firefighters, and they teach us about everything about a fire, like what different fires are called, what they look like, what to expect, when the wind's coming, what's gonna happen to it. So we take like online classes through like FEMA. We do the fire conference, talk to the firefighters. We go through training, and we do training buckets where we go out to Chatfield Reservoir, which is funny because it's literally like 5 minutes from my house. So all my neighbors can watch me dropping buckets and stuff from my house. But we'll go out there, we'll dip buckets into the reservoir and we'll drop them on trees and we'll practice on like targets and stuff. That's it. So you'll literally drop like 4 or 5 buckets, and then guess what? It's the real thing.
It's go time.
You learn on the job, yeah.
So can you kind of, for people that understand aviation and the movement of aircraft and stuff like that, and kind of their time and space, can you explain how busy like the airspace is over a fire? Is it busy? Is there how do they control the different drops and stuff like that?
So it's incredibly busy. There's air attack, which is, sometimes it's a fixed wing airplane. Sometimes it's, a smaller observation helicopter that will be, think of it like a column of space, right? Mm-hmm. So at the top of the column is the air attack, and they'll view everything below them. So they can deconflict you. So anytime you go into zones, they'll give you a map and show you where the zones are. You have to call it into air attack first. They'll deconflict. So they know you're in there. They'll deconflict you from other aircraft. But in the heat of it, when you're looking down, you see the hot shots on the ground. you see the fire closing in on them from different spots. You want to protect those guys on the ground, and you're flying around, you're just spotting other helicopters and other aircraft places, and you're deconflicting internally. So it gets pretty heated. We were up there. We were in 2 Blackhawks. There was a Chinook, and it was like I think it was a civilian Chinook, and then there was a civilian Huey, and we're all fighting the same fire at one time, but we're just communicating over the radios to each other, alternating turns, dropping buckets on the fire. So it's a lot of attention to detail and a lot of, keeping your head on the swivel, lack of a better word. Yeah.
That's awesome stuff, man. It's got to be a rush, like getting through all that. And I'm sure at the end of the day, you're just beat.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, it's 8 hours of dropping buckets, and yeah, you just like we had hotels, which is funny because the fires were so crazy. It like burnt all the like the cell phone towers. It like burnt all the internet cables. Like we didn't have internet there. We couldn't call home or anything. So like we're just at this hotel room watching the fire in the distance, ready to go do it again tomorrow, get some sleep, and then get up in the morning and go do it again.
Man, that's good stuff, though. I'm sure, obviously the people appreciate that. You can't be mad about people out there fighting fires. I don't know. That's a cool job, and big shout out to the firefighters on the ground, too, man. Those hot shots out there. That's tough work for sure.
Yeah, people think the things that we do is crazy and dangerous, and it is, but seeing those guys, I was like, those guys are the true heroes for sure.
Dude, they're in the face of it. That's like that's legit stuff. I mean, there's a lot of fire. I've had a couple guys that have done that are federal firefighters stuff come on and talk about it, and I didn't realize how hard it is to even get into it. And obviously, it's like everything else. There's different levels of wildland firefighters and stuff. But it's a cool job field for anybody that's out there listening to this that may be interested in something after the military that kind of tied you over for that excitement stuff. That's probably a good thing to get into. I'd like to hear kind of, well, let's go ahead and talk about, let's start over. I'd like to hear any advice you'd give to someone that's coming in right now wanting to be a pilot in the Army, and then we can kind of transition from that and talk about your organization and transitioning out of the military and stuff like that.
So I just had 2 cousins, younger cousins, join the military, and I gave them this advice. So I would give anyone this advice coming in. Choose the Air Force. No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. No, they wanted to join the Army. So I said, a great way to do it, come in, either go to ROTC first, like go to college, get a degree, join as an officer, and then determine what you want to do. If you want to be enlisted, think of the career that you want to do in 10 years. And maybe you're not there right now, but think of the building blocks. So I had one cousin who's like, I want to fly helicopters. He's like, he wanted to be a Chinook pilot. He was like, I want to fly Chinooks. So I was like, all right, man, the best way to do it, if you don't want to commission first, go in as a crew chief. Like start in as enlisted, get in with the aviation guys, understand your air sense, understand radio calls, all that stuff that you can do as a crew chief. That way, when you're ready, you already have a reputation in order to be, to go to your flight board. Like they already know you going in, and you'll have way more knowledge than most people who are applying. Like with me, like I took the SIFT, which is like I don't remember the acronyms, it's something flight test. I did really well in like math. I did really well in like the reflexes and vision tests. But when it came to like aircraft knowledge and aviation knowledge, I was like at the bottom. Like me and mechanical engineering just don't really mix that well. Like I learned what an alternator was in flight school. I had no idea what that was before I was in flight school. Yeah. But yeah, like think of where you want to be in 10 years and just start with building blocks. But if you've never been in the military and you want to be in the military, the best way to do it, go to school first, get a degree, get into the military as an officer. If you're in ROTC during college, you can be on scholarship. So you can essentially get your entire undergrad paid for. Mm-hmm. Then you can commission. Then once you serve in the military for long enough, 4 years, you have your GI Bill. Now, guess what? You can either choose to give 4 years to your kids, or you can go to grad school for 2 years. And then if you want to get a PhD, you can get a PhD for 2 years, or give those 2 years to your kids. Like there's so many options. There's so many options.
Yeah, a lot of options, and schooling is important. I was telling someone, I was like, if my own son wanted to join, I'd probably recommend that he maybe not if he wants to go be an enlisted guy, at least go and get an associate's degree, because I think a lot of people enlist into the military right after high school, and I got in trouble. I got arrested, so I didn't get to join right after high school. And I was pissed at the time, but looking back, I got some life experience, like living on my own, working a regular job and stuff like that, like waiting, and I think that's kind of invaluable stuff that you can bring into the military. So I agree. I think going to school for at least a little bit and trying it, or doing something in the real world for a couple of years, just to, because that 18 to 22, that's like your freedom, your first time away from school or parents or whatever. And then going into the military, and when you're 18, a lot of people think it's going to be super awesome and they're going to have all this freedom and they're away from home. And it's kind of like that, but you have like 20 to 22-year-olds standing over you telling you what to do, all day until you kind of prove yourself there. So I think that's good advice to get out and do that. And again, like you said, education, take advantage. So many times I signed up for school while I was in. I was like, I'm going to sign up for school. And I'd go down and get the paperwork started, and they'd be like, hey, you're going on a deployment. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to have time while I'm deployed. I had time. And I did that like 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, every time I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to have time on this one to go to school. So I'm just going to wait. And then when I was like, all right, I'm getting out, and I decided 2 years out from my EAS, I was like, I am going to school, and I'm just going to crush classes. And I knocked out like 30 credits before I got out. So when I graduated from SDSU, while I was in SDSU, I was taking full-time, 5 or 6 classes at a time. And I've graduated, and I still have over a year's worth of benefits left. So now I can go and do, like you were talking about, if I want to go to a master's program, I can. If I want to start something else, I can. And that's a really key thing that people need to think about for their transition. Take advantage of those services and that like education opportunities and stuff like that while you're in, so that it makes the transition smoother and frees up more benefits for you on the back end.
In the GI Bill, they've opened it up a lot more than they had before. Like you were saying that you might want to do a private pilot's license. Like you could use your GI Bill for that. So that's an entire year that could probably pay for the majority of it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that I've heard conflicting information. If it was something that I was going to pursue for sure and try to use my GI Bill, obviously for everyone that's out there, the best thing you can do with your GI Bill, if I, in my mind, let's say I want to go to SDSU and I want to go to this degree, the best thing you can do is contact the VA representative at that school and find out what you need to do. Like, they're there to help you out. They're going to give you all the information, set you up for success. At least at SDSU, I couldn't speak better about their veteran organization there and the VA rep getting, all the stuff set up. So just reach out to those people and be like, hey, I'm a veteran getting ready to transition out. I'm looking for this kind of program. What's my prerequisites? Because they may tell you, hey, man, you might not get into school right now. Go to like a community college, didn't apply here, or something like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. They get paid to do that, and they're very helpful. I consider myself a decently intelligent person, and figuring out my education benefits and how to apply and everything was exhausting. It was very overwhelming. So your VA rep will definitely help out with that in your school.
Let's talk about your organization, what you guys get into, and I guess it's kind of what you're here for. And what I'll do is also, before we get into it, for those listening, I will add the links for his Facebook page for the Colorado Veterans Project, social media pages and website into the show notes, so you can check it there. But if you want to kind of go into what is the Colorado Veterans Project and what do you guys do for the community?
Sure. So it's a nonprofit organization. We host special events throughout the state of Colorado. We raise money for veteran service organizations. So we always look for organizations that are on the front line of helping veterans. Transitioning, with any service-related industries or injuries that they may have had from their service-connected disabilities, anything. So it's very broad. Specifically what we do, though, we like to do runs. So a big thing with me, we've talked a little bit about my deployments. I mentioned my first deployment, I was in the desert for 15 months as a 20-year-old kid. When I got back home from that, I felt really disconnected. You know what I mean? Like trying to integrate myself back into a normal environment. I remember catching myself like mean mugging people in a bar. Like I just wasn't used to having so many people so close to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not that type of person. Like I'm not that type of person to be defensive like that. So I'm fortunate that I was able to catch that in myself. And what I did for myself is I decided to become a bartender in order to like surround myself into that like in type of environment to kind of ease myself back in. My second deployment, I kind of expected I would have something like that again. So I took 3 months off and I just went backpacking and I went away from the world for like 3 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then when I moved to Colorado, man, like I was meeting a lot of people who kind of had the same experiences as I had. And I thought there's got to be some kind of an opportunity for people to kind of just get together and build a community. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I started the organization in the first sense, is because I'm like, it would be great to build this community, not just the veterans, but a community of veterans and non-veterans together where we can just kind of talk and do something, fun together. So it all started off with a 5K run. So I'm like, let's host this run for Veterans Day. And it just bring the community in with veterans, with uniformed military, and just start a conversation and have fun together and realize that we're all the same people with similar stories. It was very successful. We expanded that over the years. But because of that event, the mayor of Colorado, mayor of Denver, actually reached out to us and said, "Hey, man, the Veterans Day parade is like super lacking here in our city. Like we're looking for someone who can take it on. Can you do what you did with the run for the parade?" So I went down there that year, and there was about 100 people that would show up on the streets to watch veterans marching down the street. Like there was more veterans in the parade than there was people watching it. Mm-hmm. So we're like, yeah, we're gonna change this. So we took over the Veterans Day parade, and from the first year, we grew it from about 100 people to 6,000 people. And then in the years since, like we're now at like 45,000 people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we created more runs and more events throughout the state. And that's kind of what we decided to do. First, it was about building communities. Mm-hmm. And then we realized, holy cow, we're raising all this money. What are we going to do with it? So personal passion is let's provide it to these organizations on the front lines. So we started doing a lot of research on all these nonprofits in the state of Colorado. So there's organizations out there that help veterans transition to aviation jobs. Stripes of Bars, we actually help start this organization up and we fund them. There's another organization that does equine therapy for veterans with PTS. So we fund them. We actually help start them up as well though, but then we fund them. There's organizations that do like retreats for family members. There's organizations that help veterans out with like traumatic brain injury. Just a lot of great organizations here. I think we're at about 125 now that we're funding.
That's awesome, man. I think anytime you can, with a run like that, and you're talking about having uniformed personnel there, I think anytime that you can introduce the general public to the military is a positive thing. A lot of people, there's a lot of people that are anti like military coming to schools and stuff because they're recruiters and stuff like that. But in today's society, unfortunately, no one really, most of the country has no impact of like, they don't understand the military. They don't know people in the military. They may have a cousin that's in the military, but actually understanding that the military is more than just a fighting machine. And I'm glad like you are here to talk about like what you were doing fighting fires or going to Kosovo and doing a humanitarian mission. There's so much more to the military than going to war and being the infantryman holding the rifle on the front lines. And there's not enough people, I think, that understand that. And so I think that's great. Anytime that you can bring uniformed personnel together with civilians and show people like, hey, we're just regular people, man. It's just regular people. And I think it's also good that I know exactly what you're talking about when you come back from a deployment. You're just around the same people all the time. You have the direct circle of your unit, your squad, your team, your whatever. And those are the people you interact with day in, day out. You eat with them, you sleep with them, you do everything with them for months, in your case, year, 15 months at a time. And then you come back to society and now you're around all these changing faces constantly in different places and noises and things you haven't heard in a long time. And people have differing kind of reactions to that. and you can call that PTSD, you can call it whatever you want. It's just like trying to come back in and be normal again, I guess. And that's how it kind of feels. And I don't know. I still feel like I go through that, even being out of I've been out for a couple years now. And sometimes it just feels weird being around people because they don't know anything about the military. And it feels like if I'm talking about the military, I'm not being relatable, or if I'm talking about places I've gotten to go, sometimes it feels braggadocious, like talking about getting to go to different, Hong Kong and Singapore and all these different places. So I just don't talk about it, and I know a lot of guys that are like that. And I think that's great. Anytime you can have an organization like you're doing, and you're funding a bunch of different, you're not like a one-trick pony. You're funding all these different options for people, so that maybe I'm not into riding horses, but maybe I do want to get a job in aviation. So that's cool that you have opportunities for a lot of people.
And it's really clear now that like the community needed it. Like a lot of people wanted to show their respect, and a lot of people wanted to get to know military people. They just didn't have the avenue to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been around for 7.5 years now. I would say by like year 3.5 to 4, like we raised over $1 million. Like we're at the point now where we've raised like over $7 million. So
that's awesome.
And we're all, basically volunteers. Like none of us are on the board full time, and there's 7 of us. So, mm-hmm. I mean, with the little amount of work that we actually, a lot of the work falls on my shoulders, I'm going to be honest, but with the little work that we do compared to what most organizations do, like it just shows us that we're doing the right thing. We're providing the community with the right opportunities to celebrate people and learn. Have you read that book by Sebastian Junger, Tribe?
I have. It's been a while since I've read it, but yeah, it has a lot of good points in there.
Yeah, so I've been to Israel before, and I talked to some, retired military. Everyone's retired military in Israel, but they were talking about, and in the book it's talking about it too, how there's not that many cases of PTSD within Israel. And the reason why is because everyone shared the same experiences. Mm-hmm. And because everyone shared the same experiences, everyone's open to talk about what they go through. And talking about it is therapy. Talking about it, helps you deal with the things that you went through and feel comfortable in the new situations that you're in. Mm-hmm. And we just don't have that here in the United States. So, because like we said at the beginning, we're 1%. Only 1% of us have ever served. So creating those communities to us was just giving military veterans the opportunity to talk about it.
So what's the 5-year plan for your guys' organization? What's the next big things coming up?
I mean, we're always batting things around. I mean, it's time versus everything. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
We're all professionals. We all have multiple jobs. We're trying to figure out how to grow the board. Building the organization. I think growing the organization is going to be relatively easy when compared to growing the board. Mm. So we're already maxed out at capacity right now. So it's either we have to find new blood, or we need to find a way to actually pay board members, because if we take it any bigger than it's going to be now, it's going to be a full-time job.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but we did just do some research studies with some college kids. They actually, an MBA team volunteered to come on as the social good project that they have to do for their MBA. And they built us a national plan. So if we wanted to take Colorado Veterans Project, take our basically footprint of what we're doing and bring it national, they let us know target cities to go into and all that kind of stuff. So we have a plan ready. We just have to kind of get our internal logistics set for that.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's always when you're growing something, it's always a wonder of like when to pull the trigger on certain things. Like, are we ready for that? Do we want to undertake another burden, or another something that keeps us busy? Yeah, I get that for sure.
We definitely want to wait till this COVID's over before we start talking about introducing new events, though.
How is it in Colorado? How's the COVID? Are you guys mask mandates, lockdowns? That's not a thing, right?
No, it's not a thing. No, it was interesting for me too, because I was deployed when COVID hit. So I mean, like, I got back in November. I came back to a whole new world. Like overseas, yes, COVID still hit overseas. However, I was on a small military post.
Yeah.
Everyone I dealt with was military. When everyone's like missions were ramping down overseas, my missions were ramping up because it was like, okay, we need hospitals, we need food, we need water. You know, these different, they halted all ground transportation within like Kosovo. So everyone's like, oh, I guess air, we'll just get there by air. So working for NATO, like we worked with 13 different countries and we were their Ubers. So anytime they needed a ride somewhere, it was calling aviation. So we were literally just like mission after mission after mission after mission after mission. The only time we really wore face masks was when we went to the chow hall. But our gym was closed down, like all that kind of stuff. So we were dealing with things on post, but still out there doing missions. But coming back to the United States, man, seeing how tense everything was. And,
oh man, I was gonna say, what was the perception of what was happening?
Yeah.
Well, what did you guys see? I mean, because I'm sure you guys had AFN or something like that.
Yeah,
so you're watching the news.
What is this about toilet paper, man? I thought it was a joke the whole time, but then I come back home and realize it was actually a thing.
People went nuts, man. People went nuts. Some people are still going nuts about it. It's unfortunately, like everything else in our society, it seems like politics has gotten involved, and everything. People have politicized every aspect of it, and people have proven themselves not trustworthy because of politicizing it on both sides of, you know, whatever argument you want to talk about. It's been a mess. I can't imagine what it was like to have been on a deployment and find out, like, what the hell? There's like a virus going around. Like, what's going on, you know? And then coming back to that.
It was interesting. I mean, we still did. Like, we went through some things. I mean, there was a lockdown on the base. You know, we had, the Army has a lot of third country like contractors. We had contractors local, like Kosovo. Yeah. They walked off base. They actually did it for our protection. They didn't want to get us sick, which was really cool. But it was a little weird losing all your services at the same time. So losing your laundry, losing your chow hall, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we went through things, but it just wasn't the same tension that was going on here in the United States.
Oh, so, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Here in the U.S., it's just whatever, man. It's just shenanigans. And unfortunately, you hear like, again, I'm in California, so we have some of the more strict rules. San Diego's not so bad. It's now city to city. Like L.A. requires masks indoors and stuff. And I think they're considering banning outdoor dining again for some reason. And I'm like, this is insane. So whatever. We don't have to get into any of that, man. But I appreciate you coming on and talking through your organization and telling us about, you know, the Army flight program. If you know any other Army guys that want to come on, I'm open to having more soldiers onto the Former X Guys podcast. Do you want to plug any of your contact info or anything before we jump off here?
Sure, man. I mean, there's so many great nonprofit organizations out there. Make sure you do your due diligence and check them out before you like sign up or do anything or donate to them. But definitely take advantage of all the opportunities that are available. There's so many opportunities for the military and so many opportunities for networking. People are always looking to hire people with experience. And one thing that military people don't really realize, or civilians don't realize about military people, is they've been in leadership positions and learning about leadership since a young age. Mm-hmm. Like most of them from 18 to however long like you yourself, man, 12 years of leadership. That's more than most people could have said when you got out. So really understand the networking opportunities that are out there, understand the nonprofit organizations that are out there. And then for you specifically, Justin, Stripes to Bars, check them out because they actually do help veterans transition into aviation careers. So you can get your private pilots or you can get your commercial pilot's license paid for. And it's not specific to Colorado.
I'd love to go get a helo license and become like a news chopper dude out here filming, you know, car chases down the 5. I think that'd be sick.
Yeah. So the guy who runs that organization is actually, he probably has some crazy war stories. He's definitely he was a company commander as a helicopter pilot. He's been an aviator his entire life. Decided when he was a captain that he didn't want to do that anymore and decided to revert to a warrant officer. And now he's a CW3. So, I mean, this guy's deployed multiple times, ran the gambit. Now he's in the cushy life, flying those VIP fixed wings.
Nice. Yeah. Apparently that's the place to be.
Yeah, but he runs the entire search and rescue program for the state. Like, super intelligent, great guy.
You have to be for something like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Well, for everybody out there, you can check out my my Instagram is @FormerActionGuys, @JKramerGraphics, both of those. My website's jkramergraphics.com. And that's the end, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Take care.